Hello, everyone. I guess we will go ahead and get started. I am Portia Curry. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am the director for the UC San Diego Black Resource Center. As the slide says, I'm also an alumna of UC San Diego, graduated officially in 2009. Long story why I say officially. But yeah, I have had somewhat of a long experience with UC San Diego, first as an undergraduate and now working at the Black Resource Center for, wow, it's been 8 years this last January. So extremely excited to be in this space with our affiliates across the board, students, staff, faculty, alumni, and excited to be in conversation with our students for this wonderful session, which is History of Student Voices, Community Solidarity, and Activism at UC San Diego. I'm going to ask our students to go ahead and introduce yourselves. This really is going to be somewhat of a discussion and conversation between myself and the students. So definitely encourage you all, if you have any questions, to drop them in the chat, and we will leave time towards the end of our discussion for folks, for us to actually answer those questions, or at least be in conversation with you. So if you all can start with introducing yourselves. Abria, do you want to start?
Yes, I can start. Hello, everyone. My name is Abria Diaz. I am a senior here at UCSD. My majors are Education Sciences and Language Studies. I am also a transfer student here at UCSD. A little bit of background about me. I am a mother of soon to be 3, actually, and my background in student activism, I'm actually currently the president of my sorority, Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated. I am also NPHC president here at UCSD. And
Abria, could you tell everyone what NPHC is? A lot of people may not be.
Oh, yes, the National Panhellenic Council. So I am president of Black Greek letter organizations here at UCSD, and I partner with a lot of our citywide chapters here in San Diego. And my sorority, specifically Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, is the only sorority chartered here on this campus. So I also work with the education department. Recently, I met with Assembly Member Jose Medina, who's the Assembly Committee. He's on the Assembly Committee of Higher Education, and we actually discussed how we could implement the new school requirement that requires ethnic studies to be taught in high schools for graduation requirement. I will pass it along to Fernando.
Thank you, Abria.
Hi, everybody. My name is Fernando Gonzalez. I'm a 3rd year, also a transfer student like Abria here, working towards a degree in global health. I currently work as an intern at the BRC, the Black Resource Center here on campus, which has been a great opportunity to work with our community and become more aware of the disparities on campus. I also am part of the Community Service Committee of Hermanos Unidos, which is a Latinx organization for male Latinx students who can come together and how to create a safe space. In terms of other things I've done off campus in my past, community college, I worked to petition and create spaces for underrepresented students to study and relax and meet others like them, because at my campus, I felt that was kind of missing. And so I still am in touch with them, keeping in touch with their progress, which has been great to see over time. And I'll go ahead and pass it off to Brandon.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see everyone here today. Thank you for giving us your time. But my name is Brandon Najera, pronouns he, him, his. And I am a 4th year double major in ethnic studies and in history here from Marshall College. And a little bit about me, I currently serve as the Metro the UCSD chair I've served on it for 2 years now. I'm also an intern over at the Cross Cultural Center. I've worked at Spaces, the Student Promoted Access Center for Education and Service, and a little bit about stuff I've done before, previous to UCSD. I participated. I'm from East Los Angeles, and I organized with a nonprofit organization for 3 years there, which allowed me to build a lot of connections, to other coalitions. I was able to go to Sacramento and go lobby for bills back in my high school days. And now I'm just kind of learning how to organize here in an institution and learning how to be a little bit more of a leader in a team role and seeing like how I can manage people. And I also participate in other programs right now, participating with a program over at UCLA called California Freedom Summer, where we're engaging with our high school students to get them to go out to vote. And I'm leading the chapter here at UCSD.
Awesome. Thank you all for your introductions. So we're here to talk about student activism and allyship and in reference to that or in relation to that. So let's talk about our own activism, and I can start. As I shared, I'm an alumna of UC San Diego, and I was definitely an activist when I was a student here. Honestly, looking back on that time, I feel like that was one of my most salient identities as a student at UC San Diego. I remember as an undergrad being really frustrated with my experience here, and activism being, I think, one of the most cathartic and useful ways for me to engage my energy when I was a student. You know, I left school, and then the position at the at the Black Resource Center was available, and it felt like a way for me to continue the work that I was doing in undergrad, but as a member of administration. So, you know, that has been my general experience with activism at UC San Diego, but I'm here to, you know, help you all talk about yours. So let's hear what your own activism stories have been. What are some of the things you all have been engaged with? And I know you talked about some of the programs that you work at and things that are important to you, but let's talk specifically around activism. Whoever wants to start.
I can go ahead and start. I'm new to this campus. This is only my second quarter here. And so I think one of the great opportunities I've had to kind of like be put under the wing of great leaders like Portia Curry at the BRC and kind of learn how to take a more activist role and engage with students like me and figure out what we actually need in terms of better academic experiences and learning. I think one of the things I've done in the past that I'm most proud of is working towards getting more diverse peer tutoring programs at my community college. I used to go there a lot often for like writing and academic learning, and I just realized that there was not like a very diverse peer tutoring section and that it was based mainly on the hiring process. And so we petitioned over my last year there, and now there's about a pretty even variety. And so I look forward to going back and seeing how they do in upcoming years.
Yeah, Fernando, you just mentioned something that I think is really interesting because it sounds familiar to stories and narratives that I hear even on this campus. You talked about diverse tutoring programs. So could you talk a little bit more about why you had diverse in front of tutoring programs? I specifically asked you that because I think all of us who are either working or students, alumni of UC San Diego, we know our campus is highly resourced, right? Our academic departments have some of the best resources across the country, possibly across the world. We have academic support services, development services, but for some reason, from underrepresented and minoritized communities are very clear about the fact that it's not serving them in the way that they needed to. So can you talk more about the reason why you mentioned diverse peer services, academic support services?
Yeah. One thing I've learned through my major is that like the cultural conditions behind everyone's background kind of affects how they interact with someone else. And so like being able to have an open relationship and like actually benefit from someone else's advice and input is all based on how comfortable they are with you. If someone doesn't feel very open, they won't have that like direct conversation, and that kind of inhibits their learning process. And so by having more diverse peer tutoring, it kind of opens up more avenues for others to feel more comfortable and kind of pick and choose who they want to learn from and who they want to interact with in terms of their tutoring, which I feel like personally has given me a better experience. and I know that others around me also have.
Awesome. Thank you, Fernando. Who's next?
I can go next and share a little bit. I think what Fernando touched on, and I think also what Portia, what you just mentioned, I think it's really important when talking about activism, student activism on campus. One of the things that really what changed for me, especially when coming to this university and in this institution, is just understanding that activism doesn't just always mean like protesting and being out there and being loud and proud. You know, it's also political education. For me, being in Mecha, for all 4 years now that I've been here at UCSD, I was actually recommended to join it because my mentor was a UCSD alum who graduated and was a part of Mecha, and she was like, it was a great resource for me. So I'm gonna like push you to go check it out. And it's honestly one of the greatest resources that I've had, because I've met some longtime friends, some longtime people who have just mentored me and nourished me to be like the leader that I am today. But if it wasn't for them and like all the community building that we do in these spaces, especially for students of color, I would have felt like an outsider, honestly, with how big, considering the fact that since I'm a 4th year, I had 2 years at UCSD while I was on campus. That campus is humongous, and you can get lost in just the everyday just like commute of just walking to your classes, just being a student at UCSD. And just for me, being in the position that I am today, one of the things that I hold near and dear to me is that me and my organization can be a pillar for folks to just get into the political world and start educating them, because I think for me, political education is one of the biggest spaces that people need to go off of when entering like this world of activism and what it means to be like an organizer and like represent your community when you're doing this, especially with some of the things that we're going to come to when we talk about allyship. That's a whole another big political term that people need to learn about, because of what does it mean to be an ally and things like that.
Awesome. And I have that question that'll be coming along next, so we'll save that. Abria.
I'm similar. I'm a transfer student like Fernando. So my first year was very much so online here at UCS in my first couple of quarters. But somehow with the visibility of the BRC, I was very active in that virtual year here at UCSD. And then finding my way through the campus and through other people who showed the visibility that I needed personally, I was able to join into other organizations that show me that I could become a leader on this campus. Pushing for and being the voice for other Black Greek life organizations has really become a big part of my college education here, taking care of things and reaching out to other leaders and staff members here on this campus. Being a voice has actually gotten us pretty far, and I'm really proud to see the strides that we have actually come along to do. Previously, it's been a while since NPHC has been here at UCSD, so bringing it back and seeing other organizations grow on this campus and educating other people about what the National Pan-Hellenic Council is has honestly brought me joy in seeing it grow again.
Thank you, Abria. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Why is student activism important? And you can answer, why it's important to you, or or why you think it's important, as a whole, why it's important maybe that students are engaged in activism.
I can go first if my other peers don't mind. But I just wanted to share that I always talk about how like student organizing and just being like a community organizer saved my life, especially considering the fact that I come from a predominantly large brown community where students are always being pushed and funneled out of our schools and pushed into the pipeline. So to me, finally seeing people who were there for me, telling me that I can go to college, that I can do more than what I was already planning to do, just opened up a world of opportunities. Because even from my standpoint, and I always tell students, especially students from the East Side when I meet them, that I didn't have the best grades. I tried my best. I organized for 3 years. I took the hardest classes, but I still only managed to graduate with the 3.4 GPA. And looking at that, if you looked at me and just saw my report, you probably wouldn't think that I was the best student, but somehow I got into UCSD. And I always think that it's because I organized and did so much for my community in that time, and it opened up a lot of opportunities for me. So I always push for students to get involved because honestly, it did so much for me, and I want to continue doing that. So my goal in life is to go back to my community and support students who were like me at one point, who just felt lost and just felt confused about everything happening in the world, especially in our communities, because you just see so much negative things happening and no one is in your corner. But finally having people in community spaces, even here at UCSD, having people who understand where you're coming from and actually feeling supported through this process is why I think it's important, because the students are, they're the generation that are going to come and do these things after, once we're done. So of course we got to lay the foundation for them to continue doing the great work.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Building off of what Brandon was talking about, not only is it leaving like steps for others to take place of, but I feel like when students come in, and especially their first and second years, like they're molds of what they will be in the future. And so I feel like taking a role in student activism is a matter of personal growth for someone in order to learn how to like advocate for themselves and others, create more communication skills, and be able to like just grow as a person, so that in your professional career, when you're an adult, you're able to carry yourself properly and know how to like speak for yourself and just move accordingly. And I feel that it's important just because social conditions are always changing, and so are students' needs in the same way. And now like students activism should be encouraged and appreciated rather than dismissed, because the faculty and policymakers here at UCSD that are making use of this feedback can make appropriate changes and just take further steps in the right direction based on activists.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just the same thing they were going to say, just the stepping stones of opening those doors for other people.
Yeah,
I was going to say.
Definitely. You said, Fernando, that activism is a personal journey for each student. And I thought that was really interesting because something that I talk about pretty often. I think a lot of people, whether staff, faculty, alumni, whomever, believe that students are just kind of protesting or, being activists for protest's sake, right? Always something people are frustrated about. Why aren't they ever happy? And I think that something I always talk about is like, what would be great is if students had the choice to decide if how and what they decide they want to be involved in, right? I think a lot of students from underrepresented communities, because of the experiences they're having, feel like it's their responsibility to opt into activism to push things along, right? Brandon, you talked about laying a foundation for students to come after you. But that's not necessarily like, some students would just, go to class or go surfing or whatever it is, the other resources that are available on this campus, right? So it just makes me think about if we have folks who are really stepping up and doing this work to support students from underrepresented communities, students wouldn't have to, I guess, use so much of their energy with activism, which helps me pivot to the next question. It makes me think about allies, right? How do you all identify, or how would you define allyship, and why is allyship even important? And it can be your own definition. I'm not looking for Webster's Webster's version of allyship, but we're all here to hear from you all's perspective.
I can go ahead and start. In terms of how I feel allyship should be represented for students, I feel like it should be kind of sort of a culture, less as an action. So like seeing faculty and staff members and alumni who are supportive and showing a culture that like motivates success for all students and is like open to hearing problems. I know that we all grow up and are scared to ask our parents if we can, you know, go outside to do things or if we can have a friend stay over. And it's just that fear of like being able to speak up that I feel like holds back activist movements and like has our students' motivation to be activists because they're afraid to speak up and express themselves. So I feel like allies can do a better job at creating a comfortable environment for people to, or ask more questions even, to create a comfortable environment for people.
Thank you.
Yeah, going off of that, I think when we talk about allyship, it's important that we even have those conversations and notice that we have allies, especially as students at UCSD. I know that for me, allies can come in all like different shapes and sizes, whether they be administrators or your fellow peers. One of the things that I always want to, like when I meet an ally or want someone to be an ally, is just always showing out and understanding and learning with one another, because allies again come in different forms and sizes, and every ally has like different powers when it comes to, you know, supporting your growth. And it honestly, the one thing that I think Fernando mentioned and I thought was like just like wow, it's just like it should be a culture, like it should be ingrained with one another, especially when doing this work, because again, even though we come from different walks of life, we all come from different communities, different places in our education, like we all do have one common struggle, and we all are trying to, when I say we all have a common struggle, I'm not trying to be like, oh yeah, like we all gotta like organize with one another, because of course we all have different things happening in our communities and we have different intersectionalities that we have to consider, especially when we talk about race, gender, class, and all those different things. But it's important that we can come out and support one another when it comes to being an ally, because I know that for me, when it comes to like having a mentor, just having someone who supports me, it's like there's generational learning that happens. You learn so much about stuff. I wouldn't have known about like stuff that happened at UCSD prior to my year, but because like my mentor was on campus when the Compton cookout was happening, I was able to learn about that already like my freshman year, besides like having to learn about it through the lens of like UCSD and stuff that has happened. Like you get real inside knowledge and also just real life support from people, whether they come from your peers or just someone like an admin at UCSD.
Thank you. Abria, did you want to add to that? Okay, awesome. So my next question for you all is, in your experience, what is an issue, or, you know, it could be several issues that students are navigating and you believe that allies should be aware of? Or something that you're passionate about that you think allies should be aware of. And we say that considering the fact that we all know that none of us can do, and when I say us, like our particular communities, whether it's the community alone or in coalition with other communities, can get these, can rid our university or our society of these different structures and systems that impact minoritized people, right? We can't get rid of racism. We can't get rid of homophobia and classism and any of the isms, right? Without working together and without even the people who experience privilege, right? And aren't necessarily going through those experiences without them actually partnering, pulling up their sleeves and doing the work as well, right? So what are some things that people may not know students are dealing with, or that you all are dealing with, and you really need allies to be aware of, and then after awareness, actually step in and do some work?
A common theme that I've seen a lot of my fellow students go through right now is some STEM students, specifically African American or Black STEM students, going through labs with other students and having difficulty being believed in or trusted in or talked down upon when it comes to labs, and having this different perspective put upon them where they feel like they're not enough for the class or for the assignment, and being second guessed. It's just students are coming and trying to figure out how to navigate that. Should they just get a new partner? Should they express it to their teachers? And if there's anything really they can do, if it's just going to continue to happen repeatedly in future labs and other labs like that. And then another thing, an issue right now is, of course, COVID issues. A lot of students are frustrated with issues like, is my teacher going to offer a hybrid system? How can I make up work if I get sick now that we're back on campus, but the rise in numbers or the rise in my community is going up? And that's an issue a lot of students have been facing on what to do next and what's next and how do I navigate that?
Yeah, I think what Abria was talking about in terms of the STEM presence on campus is really something that I connect with as well. Me personally, I'm just starting my first research opportunity here on campus with the OASIS program, and it's definitely exciting and I'm loving to be involved, but I am noticing like the hesitance from others to speak up and the increased, like she said, lack of belief in other students as they're going to be more like, it's like they internalize that in themselves and they perform at a lesser, or they perform with less motivation and they feel like discouraged by like the way they're approached. And so far I haven't seen any experience personally, but it's only my first week there. And another issue I feel like is big is the constant switch from virtual to in-person. I've had other friends and students who have moved back home due to the virtual programming and believe that it was going to stay virtual, and then it comes back and they're expected to up and leave everything and come back to campus to learn, and that they aren't really receiving the accommodations for their other like transportation issues. And so I feel like it's just hard for people and for students to really embrace their academic experience when it's fluctuating so often.
Yeah, I can add on a little bit, just some different perspectives of other things that I've seen as well as a student. I know that I've seen in the chat that there are some people who are talking about having like also having like children coming here to UCSD. And I think one of the biggest things that has been affecting UCSD students in general has been the whole housing crisis. The housing crisis has been such a big thing happening this year alone, especially considering the fact that with COVID and everything that had happened, that everything that Abria and Fernando are mentioning, students had to leave campus and go find housing in such an inflated market in La Jolla, and not considering the fact that something that we talked about is that a lot of us may come from different communities, and again, race, class, and gender plays a role. That I personally I come from a low income background where my parents back home do not have the fanciest things. We all share one room together, but yet La Jolla and the school expects me to come out, drop thousands of dollars for a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, which I can't afford, especially with the wages that I get paid at UCSD. And that's something that I was lucky enough to actually find housing, and not considering the fact that so many students on our UCSD Reddit were talking about like, how to live in your cars without getting ticketed, or how to like not get in trouble with like UCPD. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. And even kind of turning it back to like talking about the Latinx students on campus, now that UCSD is pushing to become an HSI, which is a Hispanic Serving Institute, what does it actually mean to be a Hispanic Serving Institute when I feel that as a Latinx student on campus have not been supported at all in my 4 years? Like this is just my own personal opinion on this, but the fact that UCSD is starting to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, and now that they're pushing for stuff like this, and then they're reaching out to more Latinx stories to spotlight us, it seems kind of like, it's going back to their agenda and what they want to see. But like, we want to see that, of course, with HSI stuff comes funding for Latinx students, but it's like, what are you going to actually do with that funding? Like, are we Latinx students going to have a say on campus? Are we going to be able to talk about what we'd want to see, whether it be more resources for Latinx students, or is it just going to be used for something else that we had no say in? So there's a lot of conversations around stuff happening on campus that I think it's important that alumni and just in general students get involved with, because there's a lot of decision making that goes into some of these big things, but it's like we as a students should have a voice in that decision as well.
Thank you all. Very, very important points that you provided. Hopefully that information is helping, folks become more aware of what y'all are navigating and going through as students. So I actually have one last question for you all, and then we can jump into questions from the group. So what does partnership or allyship look like moving forward? How can alumni, faculty, and staff better serve as allies to students? So, and that might be allies from within our communities or outside of our communities. How can people show up to better support students from you all's perspectives?
I can go ahead and start on this. I feel like going forward, allyship should start to become more widespread and equitable. And what I mean by that is that students should be supported by partners in general. However, there's definitely certain issues, like the ones that were highlighted today, which deserve more attention than others, and they should be a higher priority by allies. And so I feel like alumni, faculty, and staff can serve as better allies by creating a comfortable space for students to open up about these issues, and they can focus more on the higher priorities.
Similar to that, I feel like staff and faculty, including alumni, just open space and room for these dialogues to happen within the campus or within the classroom or departments to understand the frustrations or struggles that students are going through, especially if it's being spoken on as such a huge collective of students, but they just don't know how to communicate that to a teacher or to a department.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything that both my peers said here, and just something that I wanted to add in, especially when talking about admin, staff, and faculty. It's just that give students space, give us a chair, give us a chair at the seat to or chair at the seat. I'm sorry, give us a seat at the table to actually be able to voice our concerns and voice our opinions over a lot of these matters, especially considering that sometimes students are being left out of the conversation. And I think it's unfair when people are making decisions for students when they are not living the day-to-day that students live on a campus like UCSD. Because I have had amazing admin allies, and I've also had allies, or I've seen admin who have a lot of power who have not done anything. And I just think it's important to recognize that if you're in a position of power and privilege, you should be using that for students. And when it comes to talking about alumni, I think that alumni also just having those conversations with students. Y'all at one point were in our position as well, dealing with a lot of the issues that may be similar or may be different. So again, we could always continue to grow, and we can learn as students. We can learn from y'all, but also I think when we have conversations with alumni, it shouldn't just be one-sided. We should always try to educate one another as well, because I've been in situations where sometimes there is this sort of ageism that goes into these conversations, and I don't ever want to be disrespectful with things like that, but it's just as much as I want to learn about you, I also hope that you're willing to learn about me, and that we can grow with one another. And yeah, no, I've seen with alumni, I think one of the things that people could do is just getting involved with students. I know that I've been able to reach out to some alumni associations who have funded us before for certain projects and stuff. And I'm that's amazing work for students. Keep that up. And I want to see that energy with everything that we continue doing moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. And I'm not sure if you all saw it in the chat, but Abria had to leave a little early, unfortunately. So, but we're going to continue on with our conversation. Brandon and Fernando, thank you so much for your insight thus far. We're going to open up the chat in our Q&A session. I've seen when I've been able to some really insightful comments in our chat. So if anyone has any questions or anything to bring to the conversation, please do. Absolutely. Someone in the chat says, grateful to hear from our current students and definitely learning from them.
I can ask a question, Portia, that's okay.
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
My name is Margaret, but I graduated in 2013, and I wanted to hear, maybe kind of touch a little bit on it, but what's your vision like for UCSD maybe in the next 10 years for like what are the things that you will hope to see implement by like, once you become alumni and 10 years later, I'm looking back, because what I see now is amazing, but I know there can be much more opportunities for us to keep growing. So I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Great question.
I can go ahead and start on that. Thank you, Margaret. It's a great question. I would say down the road, I look forward to seeing more diverse and higher admission rates. So I know that we've been steadily increasing over the past couple of years, and it's gone up bit by bit. But I do hope that in about 10 years' time, I'll see a more balanced admission rate where we have more engagement from other communities and resource centers that we have on campus, because I feel like there's a lot of funding and it's a beautiful organization that we have that's built different community centers, but I feel like there's a level of engagement that's missing due to the level of admission rates. And so I feel like by having a higher admission rate from different cultures and backgrounds, we'll see a more inclusive culture.
Yeah, and I understand that from engagement at the BRC with admissions that it's also our yield rate, right? So students who, after being admitted, actually choose UC San Diego. And part of that, I think, is, you know, the culture and the experience that people have. So I think that's another piece that is going to be so important for all of us to come together across campus, students, staff, faculty, and alumni, to be thoughtful about the reputation that UC San Diego has and what we need to do together to shift it so that people see themselves at the university, they feel like they can belong here, that they could be successful here, that they can thrive. I think a lot of people look at success and equate that to thriving, right? And there's so many students who are getting A's but are miserable, right? So how do we create a space where everyone is invested in ensuring that every student has a good experience? So that was really, really good. Brenda, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can add a little bit. Besides, like, everything that Fernando said was already like very spot on. But I think just something that I would like to see in 10 years after like being an alumni is just that we continue to have these conversations, but hopefully aren't stuck in the same place that we are now. I mentioned that because recently at Marshall College, last year actually, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of Marshall College. As you can see, like, per my background, that's like the 50th anniversary things that we've been using that I have not changed since then. But we were able to actually talk to alumni, and we're able to meet people like who were involved with the founding of like Third College and Marshall College. And one of the things that like we saw when looking at demands is just that a lot of the things that people were fighting for back then are still relevant now. So hopefully, I know that 10 years, in 10 years, if everything could be solved with UCSD, that would be amazing. So I think it's maybe not, but I just hope that we're making progress forward with some of the demands that students are making, whether it be from the various different organizers of student organizers coming from a lot of different walks of life. I just really hope that we continue to make change on this campus.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I can say, Brandon, that from the point that I was a student at UC San Diego to now, I do see a number of things have changed, right? And I do see where there's been efforts made, but we still have to change. Like, there are some things that are probably baked into the fibers, right? And into the foundation that impact culture and the way that we experience the university on a day-to-day basis. So it's going to take time and a lot of hands, you know, pushing this work along. But I'd love to see a dramatic change in the next 10 years as well. Marlene, it looks like you have a question.
Well, I'm a graduate of Thurgood College, 1974, spoke at the last commencement, if you were there. And I just have to say, in the last 50 years, I have seen change and I am hopeful. when we started the Asian American Student Alliance, we only had 3 members.
Mhm.
And it's a brand new world. We only had 5,000 students on campus. So when I see Brandon and Fernando and Abria and all the people, when I walk the campus, I'm part of the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. You have to be 55 years and over to be part of that. But I'm just so proud when I did, I'm a retired public school teacher. So when I did field trips and I had my students stand at that background of where Brandon has, I have pictures every year of my students in front of that. So it's just so exciting to see how far we have come, and particularly how our state government approved ethnic studies and is now requiring that. We fought for that for decades. And that's a big step for all of us to get involved in and support. So I'm just so thankful for scholars like Fernando and Brandon and all the other students today, as well as the diversity in the administrative staff like Portia and everyone else. So I just, from my perspective, I just want to tell you there's so much hope and there's so much we have achieved in the last 50 years.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that perspective. Other questions or comments? Binka? And please correct me if I mess your name up. I apologize in advance.
No, you said it fine. Trying to turn my camera on there. Yeah, I'm sorry. I came a little late, but I keep hearing things being spoken of in general terms, like the changes in the last 50 years. So I was hoping to get specifics. I don't know if that was talked out at the beginning. So I know that our last speaker just talked about how there's a larger Asian community on campus. So that would be one specific thing. But I'd like to hear, rather than in general terms, what are the changes that haven't occurred according to Brandon and perhaps Fernando, and what are the changes that you would like to see from here on out in specifics? Thanks.
Question. Some specific things that you all like to see.
Well, maybe if we could start with what hasn't happened yet, since that would be step one.
I can share a couple of specifics. For starters, I know that I currently live here at the Black housing on campus over in Catalyst and Sixth College. And one of the things that we all talk about amongst each other is the lack of more African restaurants and Black-owned restaurants on campus, and then dining hall menus. We've kind of seen that even as opposed to this upcoming month's Black History Month menu, many of my friends were very unsatisfied with the quality of the meal and felt that it wasn't meeting the standards that they come to see normally. And so while I feel like they're trying, I feel like they could be doing a better effort in making a more like respectful and satisfactory meal for things like that. I know that I have a colleague who is working on a representation of Black faculty members and professors who are teaching on our campus. And so one thing I found is she's kind of having a struggle finding enough. And so I feel like more representation on campus over time is also something that we can add. Just to name a few specifics for you.
Thank you, Fernando.
Yeah, I can add like things that I think have changed, especially with considering that 50 years has been like a long time with a lot of advancements here at UCSD. I know that for one has just been the fact that, again, as Marlene mentioned, is just in general, like there has been a rise of more students of color coming to UCSD. And I think that's really important to highlight. The fact that UCSD is even able to consider being an HSI now is that means that like we're reaching almost 15% of students on campus come from Latinx like backgrounds. And I think that's that's just super cool to even acknowledge, because one of the questions that I know that that I saw that we were gonna kind of go over was just like my expectations of UCSD at first. I'm from LA. I've been in a very like niche bubble of like being from Los Angeles. So when I heard San Diego, I was like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna see like so much people like me, like they're near the border. And then I come to La Jolla and I'm like, damn, like this is not what I was expecting at all whatsoever. And I've had my fair shares of insults thrown at me, especially being around La Jolla. But just in general, I think there's been a lot of good strides when it comes to education. I know they mentioned ethnic studies, and I mean, always got to rep that since I am an ethnic studies major. There's been a lot of strides that happened, especially in the 2010s, considering all the EDI stuff that happened and all the requirements that students are now required to take. Even just the resource centers on campus, there's just so much support for students now. And I think what I want to see when we talk about like 50 years later is just that students continue to feel that support, continue to feel represented in their courses, continue to feel represented, whether it be with their food, whether it be with their restaurants, because just like Fernando mentioned, I've had peers talking about that they want to actually see like good Latinx food, like they want to actually feel represented on campus. And EDI, it stands for equity, diversity and inclusion. And it means like requirements that actually have students take ethnic studies classes and take classes that are not just particularly focused on like their major, but more classes that have them think outside the box and have them talk about like race, gender, and class and things like that. But yeah, I just kind of want to continue to see those strides because again, I feel like for me, if it wasn't for like the little bubble that I've been able to form at UCSD, I probably also wouldn't have felt welcomed as much as I did.
Thank you both. Okay, so we have a question in the chat. This is sports specific. Do you feel like UCSD athletics is an inclusive environment? Why or why not? Is there anything that you would like to see more of? I think that's a really timely question, especially considering the fact that we just went D1.
I ain't gonna lie, that's a tough question because I have nothing to do whatsoever with sports. So I'm sorry, but I personally can't give you the insight on that, especially considering the fact that it's kind of funny because I don't really see UCSD as athletic school really. I mean, we don't have a football team and stuff like that. I know that, yeah, the basketball team recently went D1, and there's a lot of other D1 schools or a lot of other D1 sports, but I'm not even gonna lie, I haven't even been to any of the games, so I can't even talk about that. So sorry, but that's I'm gonna have to pass on that question.
I can go and add a little contribution to this question. Trying to see where to start. I've gone to a couple of games, and I feel like the use of intramurals is a great opportunity for more inclusive environments, because I know that not everyone can play at the highly competitive level of professional, especially as we do go closer to D1 in all categories. But I feel like intramurals offers more opportunities for people to kind of express their interest in the sports and create a closer, smaller community within UCSD. I do feel like they can be more inclusive in terms of the cheerleading. I know that I have a friend who is on the cheerleading team, and she's one of the only persons of color on her women's cheerleading team. And so she's told me how sometimes she feels out of place and doesn't feel like she belongs entirely. And so I feel like that could be one aspect of sports athletics that UCSD can work on. But I feel like in general, it kind of has to be based off of level admission rates and the overall presence of different people on campus.
Thank you both. I think I see your hand is raised. Is that one from before?
No, I just wanted to add something real quick.
Okay,
I graduated from UCSD Ravel College because it's required, and in 1989. So I just want to note one change that is obviously a positive change, and the EDI. I know I've seen DEIA, so there's different, I guess, acronyms for that. I wasn't familiar with the EDI one, but Anyway, one of those is what we're doing here on screen. Most of us is having our pronouns on. And I wonder what the situation is now. I came out after leaving UCSD, but what is the situation on campus for the LGBTQ community?
Well, I can speak generally, and just name that I think our students, someone earlier, I think it was Brandon, talked about our students, everyone having an intersectional experience. So I think, any of our students who, might have whatever racial identity as well as identify as queer or LGBTQIA plus, I think that there might be some challenges, right? I will acknowledge that our LGBTRC, who the director is Sean Travers, and the other team members there, Marty Bell and Corey, have done excellent work to support our queer students, as well as all of us being thoughtful about the experiences of our students who might identify as Black, but also identify as queer, or might identify as Latinx, but also identify as queer. But just like with any other underrepresented minoritized community, I think that there's work to be done. So I think it's a matter of everyone also being mindful that all of our students, regardless of how they might look when they show up, everyone has different identities and shows up in different ways, right? And I think when students talk about being able to feel like they belong regardless of their identities, I think that's part of it, right? Not feeling like they have to shed any piece of their selves or their identities to feel like they belong and are welcome. So that's really general, I know, but I think that definitely work is being done. There's been a lot of progress. For instance, the Gender Recognition Act, I know that's something that our LGBTRC really led work on ensuring that that was instituted at UC San Diego, that students and our staff, really anyone, in relation to the university, can show up and be validated with their lived names. So that's certainly work that I've seen done, but always more support and work that can be done, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Portia on that. I feel like as a student here on campus, I've seen the culture be a lot more progressive compared to other universities. I feel like UCSD is a lot more culturally sensitive and more aware of the differences and how to respectfully acknowledge it. And so I feel like I've had a friend who, before she was here on campus, did not feel comfortable coming out and talking about herself and expressing herself openly and truthfully. And then when she came here, she felt a lot more comfortable and that she feels like she can naturally just be herself. And so I feel like personally, there's been great strides in the LGBT community.
Yeah, and just one thing that I wanted to add, especially with what Portia was mentioning, is just also that, yeah, there's like students who also are organizing in regards to making and building spaces for LGBTQIA folks. I know that one of the organizations that I've had the privilege to work with as like the chair of MECHA and also just as an intern at the Cross is QTPOC, Queer Trans People of Color, and highlighting that there are organizations and students who are pushing to make sure that students feel welcomed and building community. But of course, like Portia mentioned, there's still a lot of work to be done, because I know that one thing that whenever we talk about QTPOC is just that the people sometimes always forget to either invite them to things or include them in the conversation, and also just sometimes a lack of students that can come out to organizations because they might not feel just welcomed at a university. So while I agree with Fernando, like there's been a lot of strides made that are really good ones, but like what Portia said, there's just a lot of work that still needs to be done moving forward.
Thank you. Marcy?
Yes, hi. Thank you all for sharing. Really inspiring. I am a UCSD grad, GPS 1997. And I was just curious, as it was Brandon that was talking about the importance of mentors, and especially as an alum, what other kind of mentors do you feel like you both need? And I hope you're taking advantage of Triton's Connect and making connections with alumni. But I was just curious. I agree with you. I think having mentors are so critical, and being mentors as well. So just was curious how as alumni we can support you even more.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Thank you so much. I did see your question in the chat, and for me, honestly, a lot of the spaces that I found mentors in or like a lot of the places that I found like my lifelong mentors have just been places that I feel welcomed in, and just seeing people in this space. And honestly, one of the things also that we cultivate here, just specifically talking about Mecha, is that we run our own mentorship program where we pair students together to make sure that they feel welcomed on campus, because it doesn't always have to be like, you know, a big little situation, but people can always have equal conversations. And honestly, like you mentioned, there is a lot of alumni programs that I'm like happy to know that they're on campus. I know that the Cross Cultural Center, we have our Alumni Roots program with a lot of the interns who have passed by there. And also I know that Ethnic Studies right now, through other conversations, are offering to connect people with other ethnic studies graduates and pair them with one another, so we could get like a career path focus in like ethnic studies, and to see that to get rid of the stigma that ethnic studies just means that like, oh, you're going to be like an organizer or something, because there's a lot of people in ethnic studies who do law, who go into engineering work, who do a lot of other type of different work. So in general, I think one of the things that I always appreciate with alumni and appreciate when I look for a mentor is just someone who always shows up and shows out. If you're gonna talk the talk, always walk the walk. And if you're gonna push, like say, my mentors always encourage me to go out there and do the best that I can. I always want to make sure that I know they're gonna be in my corner with anything that happens.
That's awesome, Brandon.
Wonderful. Thank you for that question. And we are at 4:58, so I'm going to go ahead and draw us to a close. Thank you first to our students, Fernando, Brandon, and Abria, who was here earlier. You all, your presence has been much appreciated, but the insight, I think, has definitely gotten all of us thinking about how we can be better allies and supporters to our students on this campus. And thank you all for attending this session. I hope that it, again, was insightful. I hope that you learned something that you can take with you in your support of UC San Diego. I'm sure you all know, as alumni, you all have a very important voice. I hope that you feel empowered to use it in support of our students and ensuring that they have a great experience at UC San Diego. So with that, I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with us, and have a good weekend.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the questions.